Hello and thank you for tuning in to this PechaKucha-style presentation. My name is Matt Morash and I am a candidate for the Certificate in Masters of Educational Technology as offered through Cape Breton University. Today I'll be speaking about my experience with this course, EDUC 5105, Designing Web-Based Learning. This is the last course I am completing prior to the beginning of my final research project, and unfortunately I did not necessarily begin the class with the enthusiasm it deserved. My participation with the first two units were definitely lacking, as I found myself dragging my feet to get the minimum requirements completed at the last minute. From the beginnings of becoming an educator, I have been a people pleaser. This caused to flatten perspectives in my TPI report. A peak in transmissions category speaks to my background in math learning. My students come in with baggage and gaps which simply cannot be overcome with finite time in a year. My style is less set in my teaching philosophy than we saw with Mr. Pratt and Mr. McKenna in their reflections. I have always found a challenge in diversifying my teaching in mathematics due to the number of DOE-mandated outcomes. I thought it impossible to move beyond the confines of our classroom's four walls due to regional and provincial assessments. I found this concept deeply relatable to our conversations about context being memorable, meaningful, and motivational. Sharing some initial insight into the activity, I recognized that I had very little experience with diverting pre-planned instructional time. I recalled my early experience in coding in my undergrad and wondered how it could be translated to students in my classroom when I was first exposed to it. Block coding seems to offer a more approachable learning experience than my early days with C++. This year, as described multiple times in our discussions, I have had the privilege of working with microbits in a project that collaborates with CanCode, the CSA, and astronaut David St. Jacques while he is aboard the International Space Station. This was one of the first times I saw student learning apply so specifically and so engagingly to solve problems in their learning environment via the living space activities. Fortunately, after receiving some feedback from Dr. O'Neill, I dug into my reserves and entered Unit 3 determined to increase my interaction on the discussion forums, and overall get the most out of the course and the opportunity to learn from my peers and our instructor. I did find myself more motivated with the concrete goal of developing an activity, and was intrigued by the uncourse model. I appreciated the opportunity to explore topics that were of special interest to us. I enjoyed contributing to a discussion on flipped and blended classrooms. More importantly, I heard from peers who were bringing elements of a flipped classroom into their teaching contexts, and began to consider if their techniques might apply to my own content areas. The positive impact of the discussion forums was apparent for me in this unit. I absorbed ideas from others, applied them to my activity design, and revised it based on peer feedback. I am often an all-or-nothing person, so the idea of taking small steps toward a flipped classroom is challenging, but learning how others have had positive experience with these baby steps was motivational. I entered the last major unit prior to course consolidation with some positive energy, though was honestly overwhelmed as that fourth unit progressed and I was faced with looming deadlines. Again, I struggled to find my voice in the discussion forums and was overwhelmed by the quantity of and rate at which content was being shared. I considered this odd since this is my final course in the program. As I read and summarized an article about discussion forum evaluation in the math teaching context, I was intrigued to think about how my own students may benefit from such forums. I hadn't taken much time to consider how this method of e-learning could work in the math classroom. It is something I plan to read more about and explore in the future. I began formatting my e-portfolio and checked in on what my peers were sharing. It was interesting to see the diversity in what others were producing, but at the same time observe the overlap between the artifacts we each chose to record. In this way, you can really see how we all engaged with the same materials, but in distinct ways that were important to our own contexts. In this unit, I felt more connected to the work than in the first two, however, did not engage with my peers to the same extent as I did in the previous. This illustrates how important it is as educators that we provide a variety of ways that our students can show they have acquired the outcomes without overwhelming them. It is certainly a difficult balance to strike when our co-learners do not have face-to-face interactions. As I complete these final projects, there are several ideas that I'd like to continue to explore. Reading more about the research that has been done to evaluate the effectiveness of technology in the math classroom, and the ways in which the instructor impacts e-learning opportunities are a few. This would inform the choices I make as I implement opportunities for students to engage with the outcomes by using technology. I am excited at the notion that bringing technology, and in particular flipped classroom methods, into the classroom may free me from the expected role of teacher as presenter and move me more towards a teacher as guide presence. However, I continue to be hesitant about how my students, their families, and the community will feel about this style of learning. As I reflect on my experience with this course, as well as the other courses I've completed for this program, I have come to appreciate the intrinsic value of both passive and active learning. This makes it clear to me that there are positive applications of the constructivist learning model, as well as behaviorist and cognitivist learning theories. Each has their own relevance and value. I also learned in several courses some of the reasons why educators are apprehensive about investing in new technologies. There is also a justified fear for how temporary and tenuous any piece of technology can be. Tech is often built to become obsolete in only a handful of years. Just recently, my school's Wi-Fi has been down, which threw my technology-based lessons for a loop. The program overall has fostered some positive growth in me as a person who integrates technology in the classroom. I found overlap and interconnection in the learning of content throughout each new course and with each new group of classmates. In this regard, it made for novel interactions, much the same as each new year of classroom learning changes with the introduction of new pupils. Dr. O'Neill's survey at the beginning of the course shared a challenge of the program that I had not previously considered, how far along each of us were. This meant for me that I had conversations that had already fleshed out multiple times previously, making the repetition feel redundant. For example, I had discussed gamification at length already. In one sense, I think this helped me to grow and see many different perspectives. Thanks to you for taking the time to listen to my presentation, and for playing a role in my development as an educator and professional. I have appreciated this opportunity to collaborate and learn from a diverse group of educators, and wish you all the best as you continue on your own paths with integrating technology in the ways that best fit your context. Cheers.